This ship was supposed to be dead. In 2026, this year, the USS Arleigh Burke hit the end of her life. 35 years. That's the number the Navy designs these destroyers to last. She reached it, and then the Navy did something strange. They didn't retire her. They extended her 5 more years, out to 2031. Then they did it to 12 more of her sisters. And here's the part that gets me. While they're keeping the oldest ones alive, they are still building brand new ones. The same design. A warship the Navy first drew up in the 1980s is still rolling out of the shipyard in 2026. Nobody does that. No Air Force builds a 35-year-old fighter design brand new, but the Navy can't stop building this destroyer. Why? 3 reasons. There's a $10 billion failure that was supposed to replace her and didn't. There's one night in the Red Sea where this exact class fought a battle the US Navy hadn't seen since World War II. And there's a replacement right now that's so late and so expensive the Navy keeps falling back on the old reliable. Stick around because by the end I want to know what you think. Keep this ship's line running or cut it and gamble on something new. Let's start with the ship that was supposed to die. Here's how this works. When the Navy commissions a warship, they give it an expected service life. For an Arleigh Burke destroyer, that number is 35 years. The lead ship, USS Arleigh Burke, hull number DDG-51, was commissioned on the 4th of July, 1991. Admiral Arleigh Burke himself was there to watch. Do the math. 1991 plus 35. Fiscal year 2026. This year was supposed to be the end. Instead, back in March 2023, the Navy approved a 5-year extension. Arleigh Burke now sails until 2031, when she'll be 40 years old. And she wasn't alone. The Navy extended 4 more of the early ships. Then, in October 2024, they went bigger. 12 more Flight 1 destroyers, the oldest variant, extended past their 35-year limit, stretched out across 2028 to 2035. That's more than half of the entire Flight 1 fleet. The price tag? Around $1.3 billion in the near term. $6 billion over 15 years. Roughly $140 million per ship per year just to keep them sailing. My own take? That number is the tell. The Navy does not spend $140 million a year per ship on old steel out of sentiment. They do it because the alternative, not having those holes in the water, scares them more than the bill does. And here's a detail most people miss. Extending these ships isn't just leaving them at the pier, they get deep modernization. New combat system baselines, updated radars, new missiles. A 40-year-old hull can end up with weapons newer than ships half its age. So the real question isn't why she's old, it's why the Navy is so desperate to keep her. And to understand that, you have to understand the ship that was supposed to take her place. Back in the early 2000s, the Navy thought the Burke's days were numbered. They had something better coming. The Zumwalt. And on paper, the Zumwalt was the future. Stealth hull that barely showed up on radar. 78 megawatts of electrical power, enough to one day run railguns and lasers. A crew of under 150, where a Burke needs over 300. Automation everywhere. It was going to be the most advanced surface warship on Earth. The Navy planned to build 32 of them. Here's what actually happened. The price exploded. Each Zumwalt blew past $7 billion a hull. The technology was too far ahead of itself. The special guided shells for its guns got so expensive, around $800,000 each, the Navy never even bought them. So in 2009, the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, pulled the plug. 32 ships became 3. After nearly a decade and somewhere around $10 billion in development. The ship that was supposed to replace the Arleigh Burke had failed. Now, I want to be fair to the Zumwalt here because this isn't a story about a bad ship. The Zumwalt was a brilliant ship that arrived about 20 years early. A lot of what it pioneered, the electric power, the stealth shaping, is exactly where destroyers are heading now. The failure wasn't the engineering. It was betting the entire surface fleet on technology that wasn't ready, and the Navy had a problem. The replacement was dead. The old design was aging, and they needed destroyers now. So they did something almost unheard of in modern shipbuilding. They went back and restarted a production line they had already decided to shut down. Think about what a restart actually means. When a shipyard stops building a class, the line goes cold. Workers leave, suppliers retool, and the specialized parts wind down. Restarting all of that is hard, slow, and expensive. The Navy did it anyway. In that same 2009 decision, Gates didn't just kill the Zumwalt at 3 ships. He ordered the Arleigh Burke line restarted. Both yards, Bath Iron Works up in Maine and Huntington Ingalls down in Mississippi, went back to building Burkes. The first restart ship, the USS John Finn, DDG-113, 2003, went to sea for the first time in 2016, the first new Burke in over 4 years. And the line never stopped again. It's still running today. In fact, it's running harder than ever. Just look at the last few months. In December 2025, the Navy took delivery of USS Ted Stevens, a brand new Flight 3 destroyer. In April 2026, they commissioned USS Harvey C. Barnum Jr., and in May 2026, the Navy accepted USS Patrick Gallagher, the very last of the older Flight 2A ships, 2 months ahead of schedule. New destroyers, this exact design, handed to the fleet within the last year. Now stop and think about that timeline. Bath Iron Works got the contract for the very first Arleigh Burke in 1985. 40 years later, in 2025, they're still building them. That is the longest production run of any surface warship in the US Navy history. No cruiser, no frigate, no other destroyer comes close. And while those new hulls were sliding down the ways, the older ships went out and did something that answered the whole question. Why does the Navy refuse to let this design die? In October 2023, in the Red Sea, the Arleigh Burke gave the answer: in combat. October 19th, 2023. The USS Carney was in the northern Red Sea. The crew thought they were on a normal deployment. Then everything changed. Some of them were thinking about port visits. Then the Houthis in Yemen opened fire. The first one-way attack drone showed up on Carney systems about 60-70 miles out. Then more. Then cruise missiles. The commanding officer, Commander Jeremy Robertson, later told CBS it was somewhere between 25 and 35 drones and land attack cruise missiles. Some of them headed up the Red Sea toward Israel. Carney shot down the first attack drone, and then the fight just kept going for 10 straight hours. Drones, cruise missiles, one after another, and the destroyer knocking them down with surface-to-air missiles, and in some cases with her 5-inch deck gun. Picture being on that crew. Many had never seen combat, some on their first deployment. And their first taste of it is a 10-hour wave of incoming fire in the dark. Here's the line that matters. Navy officials said it plainly afterward. Not since the Second World War had the US Navy been engaged in a surface fight like that. 80 years, a 30-plus-year-old destroyer design lit up in the dark, throwing interceptors at a wall of incoming fire and holding. That was day one. It was just the beginning. Carney didn't go home after that night. She stayed. And over about 6 months, that one ship fought 51 separate engagements. 65 Houthi targets destroyed, drones and missiles launched from Yemen. When she finally pulled back into Mayport, Florida, the chief of naval operations stood on the pier and read those numbers out loud. The entire crew got the Combat Action Ribbon, a distinction that hadn't been given to a whole ship's force since the Gulf War. And Carney wasn't the only one. Take the USS Gravely. January 30th, 2024, a Houthi anti-ship cruise missile came screaming in. Normally, these destroyers kill those threats 8 miles out or more. This one got inside a mile. So Gravely used her last-ditch weapon, the Phalanx. It's a 20mm Gatling gun that fires 4,500 rounds a minute, radar-guided, designed to shred a missile in the final seconds before impact. It worked. The missile went down inside that final mile. A mile of warning against a missile faster than sound? That's the margin these crews worked with, night after night. Across the whole campaign, Arleigh Burke destroyers shot down dozens of drones and ballistic and cruise missiles. Now here's the honest part nobody likes to say out loud. Every one of those intercepts cost the Navy a missile worth $1 million or $2, knocking down a drone that might cost a few thousand. The ship won every fight, but the math of it is brutal, and it's a real problem the Navy is still wrestling with. Quick question for you while we're here. Do you think trading $1 million interceptors for cheap drones is sustainable, or does the Navy need a new answer? Drop it in the comments, I read them. But on the core question of this video, the Red Sea settled it. Why won't the Navy let this design die? Because in 2023 and 2024, it was the design standing between enemy missiles and the ships behind it, and winning every single night. And the ship that was supposed to replace it couldn't have done that. That's worth understanding. So why did the old design beat the new one? It comes down to a word the Navy loves: flexibility. The Zumwalt was built for one main idea: sneak in close to a shore and bombard it with those special guns. Narrow mission. The Arleigh Burke was built around the Aegis combat system, an integrated network of radar, computers, and missiles named after the mythological shield of Zeus. And Aegis can do everything at once. Shoot down aircraft, shoot down cruise missiles, shoot down ballistic missiles in space, hunt submarines, strike land targets with tomahawks. One ship, every threat. A Burke carries around 96 vertical launch cells in the deck, and you can load almost any mix of weapons into them. Air defense missiles, anti-submarine rockets, Tomahawk cruise missiles. The mission changes, the loadout changes, the ship adapts. And that flexibility is exactly why the Red Sea went the way it did. When the threat was waves of cheap drones and missiles, the Navy didn't need a stealth bombardment ship. It needed a missile defense Swiss Army knife that could sit on station for months and kill anything that flew at it. That's the Burke. Here's my honest read. We romanticize the cutting edge, the stealth, the exotic, but war at sea rewards the ship that does the boring job for months without breaking. Reliability beats novelty. The Burke is proof, and the design kept getting better, which brings us to the version that's now replacing the Navy's cruisers. The Arleigh Burke you see rolling out of the yard today is not the one from 1991. They've built it in waves. The Navy calls them flights. Flight 1, the originals, displaced about 8,300 tons, 90 launch cells. The SPY-1 radar, good for its time. The newest version, Flight 3, is a different animal. It's grown to around 9,700 tons, and the big change is the radar. The new SPY-6 can detect a target at roughly twice the range of the old one. It can track ballistic missiles and aircraft and cruise missiles all at the same time, with far more sensitivity. And this is happening right now. The lead Flight 3 ship, USS Jack H. Lucas, commissioned in 2023, and the Navy has been taking delivery of more ever since. Here's why that matters. The Navy is retiring its old Ticonderoga-class cruisers, the big air defense ships that used to guard the carriers. And what's replacing them? Not a new cruiser. The Flight 3 Arleigh Burke, a destroyer first designed in the 80s, is now taking over the job of the cruiser. Analysts have called Flight 3 one of the most successful warship programs the Navy has going right now. Same hull lineage, 4 decades of refinement, and it ended up so capable it made its own replacement. And the cruiser above it almost unnecessary, which raises the obvious question. If this thing is so good, where is the actual next generation ship? There is a next-generation destroyer. It's called DDG-X, and on paper, again, it looks great. Bigger hull, an integrated power system like the Zumwalt had, with room to grow into lasers and future weapons. More space, more margin, designed to carry whatever the Navy invents over the next 50 years. There's just one problem. It barely exists yet. The Navy doesn't plan to even start buying the first DDG-X until around fiscal year 2032. And the estimated price has climbed to as much as $3.4 billion a ship. Sound familiar? Big promises, far-off timeline, rising cost, the exact pattern that burned the Navy on the Zumwalt. So while DDG sits on the drawing board, what does the Navy do? It keeps building Arleigh Burkes. It keeps extending the old ones. Because a proven destroyer you can build today beats a perfect one that shows up in the 2030s. Maybe. That's not nostalgia, that's risk management. You don't bet the fleet on a ship that doesn't exist when the threat is showing up right now. Now, here's where I'll push back on my own argument, because it's fair. You can't ride a 1980s hull forever. At some point, the design runs out of room, out of space, out of power, out of margin to add the next big thing. The Burke is near that ceiling, so the Navy is walking a tightrope. Lean on the old ship long enough to get the new one right, but not so long that it falls behind. Get that timing wrong in either direction, and it's a problem. And there's one more set of eyes watching all of this very carefully, across the Pacific. From Beijing, this whole story looks different. China has been building warships at a pace the United States simply isn't matching. By sheer numbers, China's Navy is now the largest in the world by hull count. They're turning out modern destroyers, the Type 052D, the big Type 055, fast. And when Chinese planners look at the US Navy still building and extending a design from the 1980s, some of them see an opening. But let's be honest about what the numbers actually mean. Building a hull is one thing. Building 40 years of experience into it is another. The Aegis combat system has been refined through real combat, including those nights in the Red Sea. American crews have generations of know-how operating it. SPY-6 and the Flight 3 Burke represent 4 decades of hard lessons baked into one ship. China is building fast, and that's a real challenge. Nobody serious denies it. But raw hull count isn't the same as a proven, networked, battle-tested air defense destroyer that's already shot enemy missiles out of the sky. Here's how I'd put it. A new ship is a promise. A combat-tested ship is a fact. China has a lot of promises in the water right now. The US has facts, destroyers that have already done the job under fire. The Burke isn't holding the line because it's old. It's holding the line because after 35 years, the Navy has made it very, very hard to beat. And that's exactly why they keep building it. Let's put it in plain numbers. Today, there are more than 70 Arleigh Burke destroyers in service. More are under construction. More are on order. The build list runs out years into the future, with new hulls already named and funded. It is by far the most produced large surface combatant the United States has built in the modern era. When a carrier strike group sails, Burkes sail with it, guarding the carrier from aircraft, missiles, and submarines. When a destroyer shows up off a coast in a crisis, odds are it's a Burke. When the Red Sea lit up, it was Burkes on the firing line. And just this year, in 2026, Burkes were part of US operations against Iran. This isn't history, it's happening right now. This is what people mean when they call the Arleigh Burke the backbone of the surface fleet, not a figure of speech. Structurally, the modern US Navy is built around this one destroyer. Take it away and the whole fleet bends. That's a lot of weight to put on a design from the Reagan era, and it has carried it. Here's the thing about the Arleigh Burke. Even when the Navy finally does move on, it doesn't really go away. The next destroyer, DDG-X, is being built around the Flight 3 combat system. The Aegis, the Spy 6, lifted straight out of the Burke. The knowledge of 40 years of building these ships, refueling them, fixing them, fighting them, all of that flows forward into whatever comes next. The man the ship is named for, Admiral Arleigh Burke, was one of the most aggressive destroyer commanders of World War II. They called him 31-knot Burke for the speed he pushed his ships. He helped shape the post-war Navy itself. It's fitting that the destroyer carrying his name became the one the entire fleet leans on, and the one the Navy couldn't stop building. There's a nice symmetry to it too. The Admiral pushed his ships harder and longer than anyone thought they could go. Decades later, the Navy is doing exactly that with the ship that wears his name. The hull number on that first ship is DDG-51. Decades later, the line is still open. So why can't the US Navy stop building a 35-year-old warship? Because the expensive replacement failed. Because the new one isn't ready. Because night after night in the Red Sea, this design did the job no other ship could. The Arleigh Burke was supposed to die in 2026. Instead, the Navy extended her, kept building her sisters, and handed her the job of the cruisers above her. 40 years after the first contract, the line is still running. Some warships get retired and remembered. This one just refuses to leave. So here's my question for you, and I really do want to hear it. Should the Navy keep building and extending the Burke until DDG is truly ready? Or is leaning this hard on a 1980s design a risk that's going to catch up with them? Tell me in the comments. If you got something out of this, subscribe. We go deep on the ships, the weapons, and the decisions behind American naval power. Fair winds, Arleigh Burke!